So I'm going to set the tone for the discussion on transition milk, and then Dr Emma Bleach of Harper Adams University is going to discuss the current trial work and past trial work they've done on transition milk at Harper Adams University. I think it's always important when we're talking about calves in the UK that I always like to highlight to British farmers and people involved in British agriculture that calf rearing in the UK is different than anywhere else in Europe and the world because of the numbers of animals you have on your farm and the number of calves you're rearing and the welfare standards that you're expected to uphold. And numbers means more issues and more disease. And so it's very important that we get things exactly right in calf rearing in the UK. Often we tell people about computerized feeders. In Europe, we say to farmers, you know, if you're a French farmer, you've probably only 3 calves on each feed station. And they're always surprised at that. But if you do the numbers, that's all they have. So it's very, very different when we have 20 and 30 animals on each feed station. And we called it we put Back to the Future in the title because you know, we're not just trying to celebrate the eponymous film, which is 40 years old this year, but what I'm trying to suggest is that things we did in the past in rearing calves, we probably didn't understand what was going on with the calf and the milk they were getting, and that really crowned the calf and its development. And our business is always about the development of the calf, and growth and other things come from that, but you have to get the development right. So if we go back to the quota years, which are not that long ago, milk feeding to calves is very much about managing your quota. So most calves were fed transition milk from their own dams or from pool transition milk for the first week and probably up to the first 2 or 3 weeks of life. But because of a lot of sex semen, a lot of heifers calving down, being able to put that milk in the tank, disease issues on farm, and quite rightly we've decided that we shouldn't be feeding necessarily pool transition milk to dairy heifers particularly. And we think actually that is probably a mistake within calf rearing. And I think it's worth pointing out to, you know, what is transition milk? Because a lot of people think transition milk is something that isn't colostrum, and we all know about some of the things colostrum does for a calf, and it's not milk that we sell to the dairy. So we think this is just the cow transiting from one milk to another. But in actual fact, the calf is the thing that's in transition, because when the calf is born, it's never used its digestive system. It's never used its immune system, and very quickly it has to do both. And the digestive system is the last part of the calf that's developed prior to birth. And that's why calves that are premature born are often more difficult to rear. But in those first hours and days of life, we've got to develop that, or the cow has got to help the calf develop its digestive system and its immune system. And one of the things I learned more recently about what colostrum does is, one of the things that colostrum does is it actually turns down the calf's innate immune system. Yes, it gives antibodies to the calf, but then it turns down the calf's immune system. Why? Because it doesn't want the calf reacting to everything in its environment and creating antibodies and creating inflammation from that. So it's then down to the transition milk to actually then take up the mantle. And that starts with colostrum, but then it continues on thereafter, actually helping the gut to become a key part of the immune system and a key driver of calf growth and health. And we think as well, you know, we know that milk changes from night to morning. We know we can get lots of melatonin if we milk cows very late at night. We know it changes with seasons, with nutrition. But we think that when the calf is at foot, that milk is a much more dynamic food for calves, and the calf is reacting to what's going on in the environment. The cow is reacting to what's going on in the environment and what's going on with the calf as well. But we miss that when we don't have the calf at foot. And what's really, really important for this development of the calf is this microbiome that the calf has in its gut. And this starts in gestation, it gets inoculated in the birth canal. It gets inoculated with interaction with the dam and on the floor of the pen. And then all the feeds, including starter feed, including water. And that's why it's key to make sure calves have access to starter feed and water and fibre from the earliest age possible. And don't be worried about intake. Every bit of intake is very, very important, and leave space for those, in terms of the milk feeding, for those things to happen from a very, very early age. And what's happening is that the nutrients within transition milk are helping the bacteria that are coming from this microbiome to actually, the good ones, to proliferate, protect the gut, and help the calf's immune system and its digestive system to develop. And again, you know, on a feed label, if you add it all up, we never have more than 50% of the crude analysis of what's in the product. We ignore the other 50%. In milk, we never declare the lactose level. We never declare the different forms of lactose because we didn't think they were that important. We didn't think they were that valuable. In milk, they're not valuable. It's the same in dairy rations. We don't often talk about the different forms of starches and fibres, which you now know are critically important. A lot of people think they're fillers, but they're actually really essential. So if we look at just milk after the calf or the cow calves down, she increases the level of lactose in her milk, which is the essential sugar, keeps the calf, essential energy for the calf, keeps the calf warm, and that's why she's doing that. But she also has huge levels of milk oligosaccharides, which are these fermentable sugars that you find in milk. And to kind of illustrate it, if we think about the difference between goat's milk and cow's milk, goat's milk is full of oligosaccharide. And that's why often they reckon that it has real health benefits. So these oligosaccharides that we find in transition milk are key drivers of that bacterial community, that microbiota, and they're the ones that really help the calf growing. And that's why the cow is producing it. So it's essential that we offer the calves that, because colostrum starts the job, gets the immune system going, protects the calf, but this is the next essential story to move on from there. And again, we started looking at transition milk about 12, 14 years ago, and researchers have now started to really look at it as a missing link. So the research from North America is saying transition milk replacers, they improve the intestinal tract development, improves the health, improves the weight gain, and you know, we even use it later on when calves are weaning. It can also have a big effect as well. So any stress factor, it has an effect. As I say, with cows, it's much more dynamic. So I'm just going to pass on to Emma now and to discuss some of her trial work, and I'll be back to tell you about some of ours, okay?
This is our methodology, 16 heifers, colostrum feeds initially, then treatments with control 7.2 litres directly from colostrum to milk replacer, transition milk, gradually stepping down the amount of transition milk they're getting, but still 7.2 litres volume. So same volume, just a different mix. And it is a transition milk replacer mix. So these are the results. And we've got here daily live weight gain. The bar this side is for the control calves, and the darker yellow is for the transition milk calves. 0 through to 4 weeks of age, 4 to 9 weeks, and then overall. And the thing that we're interested in here is that those calves that, if we look at overall daily live weight gain, we're seeing a significant increase in daily live weight gain of those calves that are on the transition milk mix. As I say, we have got lots of other data to pull together for these calves, but just as a bit of a proxy to indicate health of those calves, we've so far pulled together the milk refusals data, looking at those calves from 5 days through to weaning. Those that are on transition milk, 3 of the 8 refused milk on 1 or more days. Of the control calves, 5 of the 8 calves refused milk on 1 or more days. So there's an indication there perhaps that the health of those calves that are getting that transition milk replacer is that bit better. But lots more data to pull into this whole story. You might look at that and think that that's a bit of a faff, because we have to ask the dairy to collect that transition milk, and we need to pasteurize it, we need to freeze it, and we need to then allocate the required amount to each calf on its given day of age. So an alternative might be to use a transition milk powder. These data are taken from a study that we ran probably 3 or 4 years ago now. It used a bunch of Holstein Friesian heifers again. They're a little bit bigger at birth than our current group. We took them from the mother immediately we find them. They were fed, this was sort of back a little while ago, so at this time we were feeding 2 feeds of colostrum, and each of those feeds was 2 litres. Then we allocated those calves based on their birth weight and their dam parity to receive either control, which was milk replacer from day 1 through to day 10, and then on to this standard milk replacer. Otherwise, they went into our treatment group, which was transition milk from day 1 to 10. And these are the results of this study. Through that period of time as baby calves, we didn't see any benefit to feeding that transition milk replacer. There was no effect on live weight, there was no effect on the health of those calves. These data that I'm showing you here are a bit of a sort of opportunistic grab at some data that we've now got coming through on these. So maybe a little bit of a small sample size for doing this sort of work, but it's interesting to note that there was no effect of the initial calf feeding on age at first calving. They all calved at about 26 months. There was no difference in lactation length. Their lactations were about 350 days. But we do see a benefit in terms of feeding transition milk on the 305-day milk yield. So that was significantly higher in our transition group, and also that yield of fat and protein. So if you don't feel that you're able to incorporate that complex transition milk regime, then perhaps a transition milk powder is the way forward. And although you may not see immediate gains in terms of daily live weight gain, there may be long-term implications. So long-term implications on those heifers, they come through their first lactation.
This trial illustrates that you know, when we look at metrics, we've got to be very careful that we don't make important what we can measure and disregard things that we can't measure. And what I'm talking about there is it's very difficult to measure development of the immune system, development of the digestive system. So we use growth as a kind of measure of that. But then if we just focus on growth on its own, we can throw the baby out with the bathwater. And if you look at the trials that are often quoted about extra milk yield because of extra growth, when you actually really dig into that trial, what they were really measuring was birth weight. What they were really measuring was colostrum quality. What they were really measuring was the immune system of those animals, because those animals in turn got more milk, got more dry feed, and grew better. But the secret was birth weight, colostrum, transition milk, and their innate immune system. So and you can't replace those things. So we started working with looking at transition milk. As we said, we felt that there was something missing, that we didn't know the full story, that the colostrum story was too all or nothing. And we could see when we went onto farm that the animals, the male animals that were usually on waste milk, who weren't cared for as well, were in poorer housing, were often doing better than the heifers who were put straight onto anybody's milk replacer, or even if were put onto pasteurized cow's milk. So we felt that there was a difference. We also our partners in this business are also very heavily involved in the human infant formula, and transition milk and oligosaccharides and the whole development of the baby is extremely important in human nutrition. It's partly because they realize that what the baby needs is not really found in cow's milk. So they spend a lot of time looking at things like GOS and FOS to try and really develop the baby, particularly where we see more and more babies being born through cesarean section. So they're not really getting that interaction with the mother as well in the same way. So we've been developing the product continually and understanding. We thought it was about health. We now realize it's about longevity, this product. It costs very, very little. If you're using your own transition milk, it costs nothing to use. Ours in combinations costs very, very little to use. And our French colleagues worked with a French veterinary group who weren't convinced. So they compared a very high quality 40% skim, high spec crude protein, high spec crude fat. But by the time we started this trial, farmers were saying to us actually they were using transition milk or transition milk replacers for up to 3 weeks to get calves really going. As I suggested, particularly in the UK, we have so many challenges from large numbers. They seem to make sense to those farmers for lots of reasons. So when we fed it for 3 weeks, we were able to record, a substantial increase in growth rate for the first 3 weeks. It was 5 kilograms heavier, and that really is money in the bank, because I don't know where that growth is. We didn't kill the animals. We don't know if it's fat. We don't know if it's tissue development, but that is and hopefully it's tissue development. But that there is there forever, and we had 0 cases of diarrhea in the treatment group versus 25% in the calf hook. So, and this is a product we made ourselves, this 40% skim, so it's a good quality calf hook. So you can see here there really is no replacement for going from milk from colostrum to transition milk. You need to have that interface to develop the calf, which is transition milk, and transition that calf from to an animal that can digest the nutrients you're going to give it thereafter. So thank you, Phil. We'll pass it back to the floor and to you.